What's up, everyone? I'm Joe Pompliano, and this is the Joe Pomp Show. Today, we're going to talk about Stephen Curry and why he is potentially worth billions of dollars to the Golden State Warriors. Now, some of you have probably seen the debate about NBA players wanting equity in the teams that they play for. The idea is simple. They've sat back and watched these teams increase in value year after year after year, and the owners are making billions of dollars. So now they want to participate in that upside in the form of equity. It makes sense, right? Well, there's some nuance to this topic, and I don't think a lot of the players in the NBA actually deserve equity in the teams, but I do think there are a select few that have proven they're worth it, like Steph Curry. So today we'll run through the numbers, and I don't think there's any better place to start than with the Warriors of the past. You see the Warriors today as the first-class organization they are in the NBA. They're the most valuable team, but it wasn't always this way. The Golden State Warriors were purchased by Joe Lacob, Peter Gruber, and a group of investors for $450 million in 2010, and everyone, I'm not kidding, everyone thought it was a massive overpay. They thought the team wasn't worth this much. Forbes had just valued the team as the 18th most valuable team in the NBA 7 months prior, worth just $315 million. So they were paying a massive premium to what the team was currently worth in the eyes of investors, and no one knew what they were doing. The team had only made the playoffs 1 year out of the previous 15 years combined, and they had routinely poor attendance. They were playing in a 45-year-old arena, and again, $450 million was the most money ever paid for an NBA franchise. It was the highest sales price at the time. But fast forward a decade and everything has changed. The Warriors are now the NBA's most valuable team. They're worth $7 billion. They brought in $206 million in operating income last year alone, which was 33% more than any other team in the NBA. It's insane. And now they're the first time in 20 years that the Golden State Warriors, or frankly any team outside of LA or New York with the Lakers and Knicks, that is the most valuable franchise in the NBA. Now, we know how this works, right? Traditionally, it hasn't really mattered whether you're winning or losing. If you're in the best market, your team is going to grow like everyone else. The media deals control everything, and that's why the Knicks, for all their problems over the last couple of decades, have maintained their spot as the most valuable team in the NBA. But this has changed, and it's all because of winning and Steph Curry. So let me talk through about like postseason and how that works a little bit from a revenue standpoint with the NBA, because this changes for every league. And I'll give you an example from the NFL after we're done with the NBA. So when it comes to the NBA, the teams get a majority share of the revenue they make in the playoffs. They get to keep 70% of or 75% of all revenue they make in the playoffs, and the NBA league office keeps 25%. So again, every ticket they sell, whatever it is, parking concessions, anything, they keep 75% of all ticket sales when it comes to the playoffs, and the NBA keeps 25%. And this makes a huge difference for the teams that are going deep into the playoffs year after year, like the Golden State Warriors. So think about the Golden State Warriors, right? These tickets are marked up at least 200% in the playoffs versus their normal regular season price. And the Warriors have built a dynasty. They've been in the NBA Finals 6 out of the last 8 years. That gives them an additional 10 to 12 home playoff games every single year, depending on how many games they win in a series and how quickly. And that has resulted in about $100 million in revenue each year. So that's like $750 million over the last decade they've made in revenue strictly off the playoffs. And again, the valuation is compounded off of that revenue, right? You receive a multiple, which is like 6 to 7 times whatever revenue you're generating in the year is the value of a franchise. So obviously, this has provided a huge benefit to the Golden State Warriors and their franchise. But let me explain with numbers how much of a benefit. So they make about $100 million every single time they go into the postseason, deep into the postseason. And when you compound that year over year over year, it's about $1 billion, anywhere between $750 million to $1 billion. And if you look at their valuation, the team was purchased for $450 million in 2010, and they're now worth $7 billion. That's a 1,500% increase or a 32% compounded annual growth rate. Compounding your money at 32% over a decade is absolutely insane. And when you look at other teams like the Milwaukee Bucks, who have Giannis and have done something similar, it is very close to being the same. The Milwaukee Bucks were purchased for valued at $312 million in 2013, and they're worth $3.5 billion today. That's 1,000% growth over the last decade and a 27% compounded annual growth rate. Now, the typical response to this is, we get it, Joe. The NBA is growing. This really isn't that big of a deal. All the teams in the league are experiencing growth, no matter if you're the freaking Kings or the Spurs or the Bucks. It doesn't really matter. Every single team is growing because of the national media rights. And that's true to some degree. The average team is up 462% over the last decade. But these teams are growing 2 to 3 times faster because of the winning percentage they have in the playoffs, the championships that they've won, etc. Part of this is postseason money, obviously the revenue share that you're getting from the NBA, but part of this is concessions, part of it's parking, merchandise, sponsorships, all of that stuff increases with wins. So when it comes to winning, my point is simple. In the NBA, it is paramount. You can make a huge difference in the valuation of a team when you win championships. The Bucks and the Golden State Warriors are the perfect example. But when you flip it to the most profitable sports league in the world and the biggest sports league in the United States, the NFL, it's completely different. So I want to show you guys an example when it comes to the NFL. So again, with the NBA, you get 75% of the revenue you get to keep as a team, 25% goes to the league office. For the NFL, it's the exact opposite. You don't get to keep any money. The NFL takes every single dollar that you make on tickets throughout the postseason and brings it in the league office for them to keep. Every single dollar. Now, it's true that you get to keep concession revenue and parking and stuff like that, but that's like $1 to $2 million per game for an NFL team. The NFL postseason is obviously shorter from a game standpoint than it is for the NBA playoffs. There's less games. Teams are barely making any money by going deep into the playoffs, even the Super Bowl. Instead of giving you money or letting you keep a share of the tickets, the NFL gives you a stipend. Literally, they give you a travel stipend. Whatever your travel money is that's required to get your team to the game, they give you that. Whatever it's required for the team to operate on game day, the employees, all that kind of stuff, they pay you for that. But you don't get to keep any of the ticket revenue and you don't get any profit from these games. Now, most teams aren't complaining in the NFL because the media deals are so big that the valuations are growing regardless, right? They have the best profit margins of any sports organization in the world because these media deals are so big. So they haven't complained yet. The owners aren't really pressed over an additional $10 to $12 to $15 million per game. The NFL is keeping that money. But let me explain why it matters, right? And the perfect example is the Kansas City Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs have built a dynasty of sorts over the last few years in the NFL. They've appeared in 3 of the last 4 Super Bowls, winning 2 of those, and their valuation is roughly in line, even winning 2 championships, right? Appearing in 3 different Super Bowls. You have Patrick Mahomes. Obviously, they've become a more popular team over the last few years. They played in tons of playoff games, Super Bowls, etc. Their valuation growth is roughly in line with every other NFL team. The league averages 126% growth over the last few years, and the Chiefs are at 146% growth over the last few years. So they're roughly equal to everyone else, but more importantly, their rank from a valuation standpoint in the NFL, if you were to rank teams 1 through 32 on a valuation standpoint, their rank has dropped 2 places over that time period. In 2015, they were the 21st ranked team in the NFL from a valuation standpoint. Today, they're the 23rd ranked team. Of course, like I said, this makes an impact with merchandise, with parking, concessions, ticket sales, whatever it is during the regular season, and so forth. But when it comes to the playoffs, they're missing out on a huge chunk of revenue that other teams across other leagues, like the NBA and the Golden State Warriors, are capitalizing on. The NBA is far ahead of the NFL when it comes to this and letting the teams financially profit off their success. And I have this interesting chart here to compare a bunch of different examples across the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, and the MLB. And if you look just top to bottom, we have the Golden State Warriors. They get to keep 75% of the revenue. Their valuation has grown 1,500% over that time period. They've jumped 17 spots in the Forbes valuation rankings, and their compounded annual growth rate of valuation is 32% during their playoff runs. The Tampa Bay Lightning are right behind them. They get to keep 65% of their revenue from ticket sales in the playoffs. Their valuation is up 16% on a compounded annual growth basis. They've jumped 11 spots. The Astros in the Major League Baseball league are doing 55%. They get to keep in ticket sales. They've jumped a bunch of percentage points to 188% from a valuation standpoint, growing at 14%. They've jumped 15 spots. And last but not least, the only outlier out of these 4 teams across the big 4 leagues in the United States are the Kansas City Chiefs. They get to keep 0% of their ticket revenue off their success in their deep playoff runs. Their business has still grown, of course, their valuation, because the NFL is growing so fast itself, but they've dropped 2 spots, and they have not profited nearly as much as these other teams and these other dynasties like the Warriors, the Lightning, and the Astros. So my point is simple. They are not benefiting nearly as much as these other teams. And players like LeBron, like Stephen Curry, like Giannis, those players that are bringing their teams deep into the playoffs every single year, year after year after year, and making a huge difference when it comes to ticket revenue that they get to keep, they're worth billions of dollars to these franchises. If you think about just the Golden State Warriors, they've grown almost $7 billion in valuation since Stephen Curry arrived there. $7 billion. Now look, he's handsomely compensated. He's going to make nearly $50 million this year. He's the highest paid NBA player in the league today. but ultimately he deserves a chunk of this pie. The NBA is talking about this right now. You can actually invest in the teams yourself. You're putting up capital into a fund that they've opened up with the Players Association, but that's not really the same, right? You're investing in them at the current valuation of $7 billion. You're putting up personal capital, and it's diversified across a bunch of different teams. It's not really betting on yourself, right? Stephen Curry is not going to the Warriors and saying, I want an equity stake in lieu of compensation or cash compensation. I'm betting on myself that I'm going to be really good as a rookie. We're going to win a bunch of championships, and this valuation is going to increase. If he was able to do that, he would have made a shit ton more money just based on the valuation growth alone. We all know equity is imperative in these situations, but that brings up a whole host of other complications. But bravo to the Golden State Warriors. They have taken advantage of their dynasty. Other teams like the Kansas City Chiefs have not been able to do this. I hope you learned something new today, and that is how playoff revenue works across the major leagues and how certain teams are benefiting more than others. Do me a favor, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the channel. I'm posting 2 to 3 of these videos every single week, breaking down the most interesting topics in sports business. So subscribe to the video, like the video, comment, let me know what I can be doing better. And last but not least, go listen to the full podcast episodes. I run a podcast called The Joe Pomp Show. You can subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you are. These are full episodes breaking down these topics into more detail. Go check it out. You will not be disappointed. We'll talk later this week. Have a great week.